The moment I saw the text on his phone, my world shattered like glass under a hammer. "Meet me tonight, love," it read, signed with a heart emoji from someone named Claire. I was Anna, the woman who thought she'd found her forever in David, only to discover I was a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air smells of fallen leaves and possibility. David and I had been together for 2 years, our love a whirlwind of late-night talks, shared dreams, and promises of a future. He was charming, with a smile that could melt doubts and eyes that seemed to see only me. We met at a charity gala, where he'd swept me off my feet with his wit and warmth. I was 28, a graphic designer with a penchant for hope, and he was 32, a marketing executive who seemed to have it all together. Our life was a canvas of plans: marriage, kids, a house with a garden. But that night, as I glanced at his phone while he showered, the canvas tore apart. The message wasn't meant for me to see. It was a careless mistake, his phone left unlocked on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the thread. Claire wasn't a colleague or a friend. She was his wife. The word hit me like a slap. Wife. David was married. The man who'd whispered, "I love you," under starlit skies was someone else's husband. The texts revealed months of deceit. Secret meetups, stolen moments, lies woven so tightly I couldn't breathe. I was the other woman, and I hadn't even known it. I sat frozen, the phone trembling in my hands. How could I have been so blind? Every memory of us now felt tainted. Our first kiss in the rain, the weekend trips to the coast, the way he'd hold me like I was his everything. It was all a lie. My chest tightened, anger and grief colliding like a storm. I wanted to scream, to confront him, but a deeper instinct told me to wait. I needed answers, not just from him but from her. Claire, the woman whose life I'd unknowingly invaded. David emerged from the bathroom, oblivious, his hair damp and his smile as disarming as ever. "You okay, babe?" he asked, reaching for his phone. I forced a nod, my voice caught in a web of betrayal. That night, I lay beside him, sleepless, plotting my next move. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. But more than that, I needed to know why. Why me? Why her? What kind of man could live 2 lives so effortlessly? The next morning, I found Claire's contact information buried in his phone. A home address in the suburbs. My hands shook as I wrote it down. I didn't know what I'd say or do, but I had to meet her. I had to see the woman whose life mirrored my own in ways I couldn't yet fathom. I drove to her house, a charming 2-story with a picket fence, the kind of place I dreamed of sharing with David. My heart raced as I knocked, half expecting no one to answer. Claire opened the door, her face a mix of curiosity and caution. She was 35, with kind eyes and a weary smile, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose bun. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but guarded. I took a deep breath, the weight of the truth pressing against my ribs. "My name is Anna," I said. "I think we need to talk about David." Her expression shifted, a flicker of recognition, then pain. She invited me in, and we sat in her sunlit kitchen, 2 strangers bound by a shared wound. I told her everything. How I'd met David, how he'd made me believe we were building a life together, how I'd found the texts. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. Instead, she reached for a drawer and pulled out a letter, her hands trembling. "I found this last week," she said, sliding it toward me. "Read it." The letter was from David, addressed to Claire, confessing not just to me but to another affair years ago. He wrote of his guilt, his love for her, and his inability to stop himself. But the final paragraph was the cruelest blow. He'd known Claire couldn't have children, and he'd sought me out because I was young enough to give him the family he wanted. I was a means to an end, a tool in his twisted plan. My stomach churned. I wasn't just the other woman. I was a calculated choice, a betrayal designed with precision. Claire's voice broke the silence. "I've been trying to hold it together for years," she said. "I thought I could fix him, fix us, But this is too much. Her pain mirrored mine, but hers was layered with years of quiet endurance. I wanted to hate her for being his wife, but all I felt was kinship. We were both victims of his lies, our lives tangled in his web of deceit. We talked for hours, piecing together his double life. David had told Claire he was working late when he was with me. He'd told me he was single, weaving a narrative so convincing I'd never questioned it. But the more we talked, the clearer it became. Confronting him wasn't enough. We needed to dismantle the world he'd built on our pain. Claire's eyes hardened as she spoke. "He thinks he can keep us both in the dark," she said. "Let's show him what happens when the lights come on." We devised a plan, not out of spite but out of a shared need for justice. Claire knew David's routines, his secrets, his weaknesses. I had the evidence, texts, photos, moments he thought were private. Together, we could expose him, not just to each other but to the world he'd manipulated. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming our power, our dignity, our truth. As I left Claire's house, the autumn sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn. I felt a strange mix of grief and strength. I'd been tricked, used, discarded in a way I never imagined. But I wasn't alone anymore. Claire and I were no longer just the wife and the other woman. We were allies, bound by a truth more cruel than betrayal. A truth that would change everything. The next few days were a blur of emotions and strategy. Claire and I met again. This time at a quiet coffee shop where the clink of cups and murmur of voices felt like a shield against the chaos in our hearts. We sat across from each other, laptops open, piecing together a timeline of David's lies. Every detail we uncovered was a fresh wound, but it also fueled our resolve. He'd played us both, but we were done being his puppets. Claire brought a folder of documents, bank statements, emails, even a lease agreement for an apartment I didn't know existed. It was his work retreat, he'd told her. A place he went to clear his head. In truth, it was where he'd taken me. Where we'd spent nights tangled in sheets, dreaming of a future that was never real. My stomach twisted at the thought of how meticulously he'd planned his deception. "He's been funneling money into a separate account," Claire said, pointing to a line in the bank statement. "He told me it was for our future, but look at the dates. The transactions aligned perfectly with our weekend getaways, dinners, and gifts he'd given me. Every dollar spent on me was a dollar stolen from her trust." I felt sick, not just for myself but for Claire, who'd believed in their marriage despite the cracks. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice thick with guilt. She reached across the table, her hand steadying mine. "You didn't know," she said. "He made sure of that." We decided our first step was to gather undeniable proof. I forwarded Claire every text, photo, and email David had sent me. She cross-referenced them with his schedule, revealing a pattern of lies that spanned years. He'd told Claire he was at conferences when he was with me, told me he was working late when he was home with her. The precision of his deceit was chilling, like a script he'd rehearsed to perfection. But there was more to uncover. Claire mentioned a colleague of David's, Mark, who'd always seemed uneasy around her. "I thought he was just shy," she said. "But now I wonder if he knows something." We tracked Mark down through LinkedIn and arranged to meet him at a park, away from prying eyes. He was hesitant, his eyes darting as he sat on a bench, clutching a coffee cup. "I don't want to get involved," he said, but Claire's quiet intensity broke through. "Mark, we're not asking you to take sides. We just need the truth." Reluctantly, he spoke. David had bragged about his side piece at work, never naming me but boasting about his ability to have it all. Mark had overheard him on calls, arranging meetups while Claire thought he was working. "I told him it was wrong," Mark said, his voice low, "but he laughed it off, said he had it under control." The words stung, but they were another piece of the puzzle. Mark agreed to provide a written statement, a small act of courage that bolstered our plan. Back at the coffee shop, Claire and I outlined our next move. Confronting David alone would only give him room to lie again. We needed to hit him where it hurt, His reputation, his career, his carefully curated image. Claire knew his boss, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, who valued integrity above all. We drafted an email to her, attaching the evidence. Texts, photos, bank statements, and Mark's statement. It wasn't about ruining him. It was about holding him accountable, stripping away the mask he'd worn for too long. As we worked, I couldn't shake the weight of my own guilt. I'd been naive, trusting David's charm without questioning the gaps in his story. Claire sensed my turmoil and shared her own, years of suspecting his distance but blaming herself. "He made us doubt ourselves," she said. "That's his real crime." Her words lit a fire in me. We weren't just fighting for justice. We were fighting for the parts of ourselves he tried to break. The email to Linda was sent that night, a digital arrow aimed at the heart of David's facade. We didn't know how she'd respond, but we knew it would shake him. As I drove home, the city lights blurred through my tears. I wasn't just grieving the love I'd lost. I was grieving the woman I'd been before this. Trusting, open, hopeful. But with Claire by my side, I felt a new strength emerging, one forged in shared pain and a shared purpose. David thought he'd played us both, but he was about to learn what happens when the women he betrayed fight back. The fallout came faster than we expected. 2 days after sending the email to Linda, Claire got a call from her. David had been called into a meeting, his face pale as Linda confronted him with our evidence. He tried to deny it, spinning a tale of misunderstandings, but the texts, the photos, the bank statements, they were irrefutable. By the end of the day, he was suspended pending an investigation. Claire relayed the news to me over the phone, her voice steady but laced with a quiet triumph. "He's unraveling," she said, "but we're not done yet." I couldn't shake the image of David, cornered, his charm useless against the truth. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him, but the larger part, the part that had spent nights crying over his lies, felt nothing but resolve. Claire and I met again, this time at my apartment, a small space filled with art prints and half-finished sketches. It felt strange to have her there, in the place where David had once sat, promising me forever. But her presence was grounding, a reminder that we were in this together. We decided to take our plan public. David's world wasn't just his job. It was the social circle he'd cultivated, the friends who saw him as the perfect husband, the colleagues who admired his ambition. Claire suggested a blog post, anonymous but detailed, laying out his deception without naming us directly. "Let the truth speak for itself," she said. I hesitated. Going public felt like stepping into a spotlight I wasn't ready for. But her conviction was infectious. We spent hours crafting the post, choosing every word with care. It wasn't about shaming him. It was about warning others, about breaking the silence that had protected him for so long. The post went live on a local community forum, and within hours, it spread like wildfire. Comments poured in, some skeptical, others outraged, many sharing stories of similar betrayals. People began to piece together who the charismatic executive was. David's name surfaced in whispers, then in bold accusations. Claire and I watched the fallout from my laptop, our hearts pounding. "This is what he deserves," Claire said, but her eyes were distant, as if she were seeing the wreckage of her marriage anew. Then came the call from David. I hadn't spoken to him since that night in my apartment, when I'd played the part of the oblivious girlfriend. My phone buzzed, his name flashing like a warning. I put it on speaker, Claire nodding for me to answer. "Anna, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice a mix of anger and panic. "Why are you doing this to me?" I wanted to scream, to hurl every hurt he'd caused back at him. But Claire's hand on my arm kept me steady. "You did this to yourself," I said, my voice calm but cold. "You lied to us both." He tried to deflect, claiming I'd misunderstood, that Claire was manipulating me. But his words fell flat, hollow against the weight of our evidence. Claire spoke up, her voice cutting through his excuses. "It's over, David. We know everything." The line went silent and then he hung up. I looked at Claire, her face a mirror of my own. Relief, pain, and a flicker of fear for what came next. The blog post had consequences we hadn't anticipated. Friends of Claire's reached out, some offering support, others distancing themselves, unwilling to believe the man they knew could be so cruel. My own circle was smaller, but the whispers reached me too: colleagues who'd seen the post, friends who asked if I was okay. I wasn't, not really, but I was stronger than I'd been a week ago. Claire and I leaned on each other, our bond growing in the cracks of our shared betrayal. But there was one more truth waiting to surface, one that would cut deeper than anything we'd uncovered so far. Claire found it in an old email, buried in a folder David thought she'd never check. It was a message from a lawyer, dated 3 years ago, discussing a trust fund David had set up. Not for Claire, not for a future family, but for himself, hidden away in case his lies ever caught up with him. He'd been planning his escape all along, ready to leave us both behind when the time came. The cruelty of it stole my breath. He hadn't just betrayed us. He'd planned to abandon us, to walk away without a backward glance. Claire's hands shook as she read the email aloud. "He was never going to stay," she whispered. "Not with me, not with you." The truth was a blade, cutting through the last of our illusions. But it also sharpened our resolve. David thought he could outrun his lies, but we were done letting him control the narrative. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The discovery of David's hidden trust fund changed everything. It wasn't just about his infidelity anymore. It was about a man who'd orchestrated his life like a chess game, moving us as pawns while he planned his endgame. Claire and I sat in her living room, the email open on her laptop, its words a stark reminder of his calculated cruelty. "He thought he could walk away scot-free," Claire said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and determination. "We can't let him." We dug deeper, hiring a private investigator with the little savings I had, and Claire's determination to uncover every secret David had buried. The investigator, a gruff man named Tom, was thorough, piecing together a paper trail that revealed more than we'd expected. David had been siphoning money for years, not just into the trust fund but into offshore accounts, hidden under shell companies. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief, stealing from Claire's future to secure his own. Tom's findings gave us leverage, but they also painted a darker picture of David's character. He'd been charming to everyone. Colleagues, friends, even strangers, but it was all a facade. The investigator uncovered stories from former coworkers, people David had manipulated or discarded when they were no longer useful. One woman, a former assistant, described how he'd sabotaged her career when she questioned his ethics. "He's a narcissist," Tom said bluntly. "He doesn't care who he hurts as long as he wins." Claire and I decided to take the fight to court. She filed for divorce, citing infidelity and financial misconduct, armed with the investigator's evidence. I wasn't part of the legal proceedings, but I supported her, attending meetings with her lawyer and helping organize the documents. The process was grueling, each revelation a fresh wound. Claire's lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel, warned us that David would fight dirty. "He'll try to paint you both as unstable," she said. "Be ready." David's response was swift and vicious. He sent me a letter, accusing me of ruining his life, claiming I'd seduced him knowing he was married. The lies stung, but I refused to let them break me. Claire received similar attacks, emails calling her bitter, vengeful, unable to let go. But we held firm, our shared pain a shield against his manipulations. Rachel built a case that was airtight, using the texts, bank records, and Mark's statement to show David's pattern of deceit. The courtroom was a battleground. David sat across from us, his charm replaced by a cold, defensive demeanor. He tried to spin a story of being trapped in an unhappy marriage, of me being a temptation he couldn't resist. But Rachel dismantled his lies, presenting the evidence with a precision that left him speechless. The judge's expression grew sterner with every document, every testimony. Claire's composure was unshakable, her voice steady as she recounted years of emotional manipulation. I spoke too, my voice trembling but clear, telling the court how I'd been tricked, used, discarded. The ruling came faster than we expected. Claire was granted the divorce, along with a significant portion of their joint assets. The judge ordered an investigation into David's financial misconduct, freezing his hidden accounts. It wasn't just a victory for Claire. It was a reckoning for the man who thought he could play God with our lives. As we left the courtroom, Claire squeezed my hand. "We did it," she whispered, tears in her eyes. But the victory was bittersweet. The legal battle had drained us both, emotionally and financially. I returned to my apartment, staring at the sketches I'd once shared with David, dreams of a life that never existed. Claire was rebuilding too, selling the house she'd shared with him, starting fresh in a new city. We kept in touch, our bond a lifeline through the pain. But there was one final piece of the puzzle we hadn't anticipated, a truth that would shake us to our core. Came in a letter from Tom, the investigator. He'd kept digging, even after the case was closed, driven by a hunch. The letter revealed that David hadn't just betrayed us. He'd done this before, to another woman years ago, in another city. Her name was Emily, and her story was eerily similar to mine. She'd been young, hopeful, unaware of his marriage until it was too late. But unlike us, Emily hadn't fought back. She'd disappeared, broken by his lies. The truth was a gut punch. David wasn't just a liar. He was a predator, preying on trust, leaving a trail of broken lives. Claire and I knew then that our fight wasn't just for us. It was for every woman he'd hurt, and every woman he might hurt again. The revelation about Emily hit us like a tidal wave. Claire and I sat in my apartment, the investigator's letter open on the coffee table, its words a haunting echo of our own pain. Emily's story wasn't just a footnote in David's history. It was a mirror, reflecting the calculated cruelty he'd inflicted on us all. "We have to find her," Claire said, her voice fierce with purpose. "She deserves to know she's not alone." Finding Emily wasn't easy. Tom, the investigator, had only a last name and an old address from a decade ago. But Claire's determination was relentless, and I couldn't let her do this alone. We scoured social media, public records, anything that might lead us to her. After weeks of dead ends, we found a faint trail. A LinkedIn profile for an Emily Carter, now 40, working as a counselor in a small town 3 hours away. The profile picture showed a woman with kind eyes and a guarded smile, a face that carried the weight of unspoken pain. We reached out cautiously, sending a message that explained who we were and why we were contacting her. Days passed with no response, and I worried we'd overstepped. But then an email arrived. "I've spent years trying to forget him," Emily wrote. "But if you're willing to talk, I'm ready to listen." We arranged to meet at a quiet diner in her town, a neutral space where we could share our stories without judgment. Emily was waiting when we arrived, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She was warm but reserved, her eyes scanning us as if searching for a trap. Claire spoke first, laying out our story, the lies, the betrayal, the fight we'd waged. I added my piece, my voice breaking as I described how David had used me, how I'd been blind to his marriage. Emily listened, her expression shifting from caution to recognition. When we finished, she took a deep breath and began her own story. She'd met David when she was 27, fresh out of grad school, full of dreams. He was charming, attentive, promising her a future while hiding his marriage to a woman named Sarah. Emily had been the other woman, just like me, unaware until Sarah confronted her. The shame had driven Emily to leave the city, to rebuild her life in pieces. "He told me I was the problem," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I believed him for years." Claire reached for her hand, and I saw the same bond forming that had saved me. We weren't just 3 women hurt by the same man. We were a force united by our shared survival. Emily told us about Sarah, David's first wife, who divorced him after discovering Emily. Sarah had moved on, But Emily had carried the guilt, believing she'd destroyed a marriage. "You didn't destroy anything," Claire said firmly. "He did. We spent hours in that diner, piecing together David's pattern. He targeted women who were hopeful, trusting, vulnerable in their own ways. He used charm to disarm, lies to manipulate, and when his secrets unraveled, he moved on to the next target." Emily's story gave us clarity. Our fight wasn't just personal. It was a mission to stop him from hurting anyone else. We decided to take our story to a larger platform. Emily suggested a podcast, one focused on women's stories of survival and resilience. We reached out to the host, a journalist named Mia who'd covered similar stories. She was eager to help, and within weeks, we were in a recording studio, our voices trembling but strong as we shared our truth. The podcast aired to thousands, sparking conversations across social media. People reached out with their own stories, some naming David, others describing men just like him. The response was overwhelming, but it also brought consequences. David's lawyer contacted us, threatening a defamation lawsuit. But we were ready, our evidence airtight, our stories corroborated by each other and by Tom's findings. The lawsuit never materialized, but it was a reminder of how far David would go to protect his image. As the podcast gained traction, Claire, Emily, and I grew closer. We weren't just allies. We were friends, bound by a shared mission. But the weight of our fight was heavy, and I struggled with moments of doubt. Could I ever trust again? Could I rebuild the hopeful woman I'd been? Claire sensed my turmoil one night as we sat on her porch, the stars bright above us. "We're not just fighting him," she said. "We're fighting for ourselves, for the women we still are." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. The podcast changed everything. Our story spread beyond our city, reaching women across the country who saw themselves in our pain. Emails flooded in, some from strangers offering support, others from women who'd crossed paths with David or men like him. Each message was a reminder that our fight was bigger than us. It was a call to break the cycle of manipulation and silence. But with visibility came vulnerability, and I felt the weight of exposure every time I checked my phone. Claire, Emily, and I met regularly now, our bond a sanctuary in the storm. We formed a support group, not just for ourselves but for others who'd been betrayed. We called it Unveiled, a name that captured our mission to strip away the lies that had held us captive. The group met weekly in a community center, a small room filled with women of all ages, sharing stories of deception, resilience, and healing. It was raw, painful, but also powerful. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving David's betrayal, I was helping others survive theirs. But David wasn't done with us. A month after the podcast aired, he showed up at Claire's new apartment, uninvited, his face a mask of desperation. "You've ruined me," he said, his voice low and accusing. Claire stood her ground, her phone recording the encounter. "You ruined yourself," she replied, her voice steady. He left when he realized she wasn't alone. Emily and I were there, our presence a silent warning. The encounter shook us, but it also strengthened our resolve. He couldn't intimidate us anymore. We channeled our energy into Unveiled, turning it into a nonprofit. Emily's experience as a counselor was invaluable, helping us structure workshops and connect with therapists who volunteered their time. Claire took on the legal side, ensuring our organization was protected from any backlash David might try. I focused on outreach, using my design skills to create a website and flyers that spread our message. Every step felt like a reclaiming of the power he'd tried to steal. But the cruelest truth was yet to come. Tom, our investigator, called one evening with news that made my blood run cold. He'd found another woman, Lisa, who'd been involved with David just before me. Unlike Emily, Lisa hadn't escaped quietly. She'd confronted David publicly, only to face a smear campaign that destroyed her reputation. She'd lost her job, her friends, her sense of self. Tom tracked her down to a women's shelter, where she was rebuilding her life. "She's willing to talk," he said, "but she's scared." We met Lisa at the shelter, a stark building that smelled of bleach and hope. She was 29, her eyes hollow but fierce, her hands fidgeting as she spoke. David had promised her love, just as he had with me, while hiding his marriage to Claire. When Lisa found out, she'd gone to his workplace, demanding answers. He'd turned it against her, spreading lies that painted her as unstable. "I thought I was alone," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was the crazy one." Claire, Emily, and I surrounded her, our stories weaving a safety net. We invited her to join Unveiled, to share her story if she was ready. Lisa hesitated, but the warmth of our group, the shared strength, gave her courage. She spoke at our next meeting, her voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. The room was silent, then erupted in applause. Not for her pain, but for her survival. Lisa's story was a turning point. We realized David's pattern wasn't just personal. It was systemic, a cycle of manipulation that thrived on silence. We expanded Unveiled, reaching out to shelters, universities, and community groups, offering workshops on recognizing emotional abuse and reclaiming agency. The work was exhausting but fulfilling, a way to transform our pain into purpose. David's life, meanwhile, was crumbling. The investigation into his financial misconduct led to criminal charges, and his social circle shrank as his lies unraveled. He tried to reach out to me once more, a pathetic email begging for forgiveness. I didn't respond. Claire and Emily did the same, cutting him out like a cancer. We weren't his victims anymore. We were survivors, architects of our own redemption. As Unveiled grew, so did our sense of hope. I started sketching again, my art no longer tied to the dreams David had tainted. Claire found joy in small things. New friends, a new city, a life free of his shadow. Emily and Lisa became anchors in our group, their voices a testament to resilience. The truth we'd uncovered was cruel, but it had set us free, not just from David, but from the fear of being broken. A year after the podcast, Unveiled had grown beyond our wildest dreams. We'd secured grants, partnered with local organizations, and reached hundreds of women through our workshops and online platform. The community center was now too small for our meetings, so we moved to a rented hall, its walls echoing with stories of survival. Claire, Emily, Lisa, and I stood at the heart of it, not as victims but as leaders, guiding others through the darkness we'd once faced. David's trial was the final chapter of his downfall. The courtroom was packed, not just with reporters but with women from Unveiled, their presence a silent testament to his crimes. The prosecution laid out his financial fraud, his manipulation, his pattern of abuse. Claire testified, her voice unwavering as she described the years of lies. Emily and Lisa spoke too, their stories a chorus of truth that silenced David's weak defenses. I didn't testify, I didn't need to. My presence in the gallery, alongside the women we'd helped, was enough. The judge sentenced David to 5 years in prison for fraud, with additional penalties for restitution. As he was led away, he glanced at us, his eyes empty of the charm that had once fooled us all. I felt no satisfaction, only relief. His punishment wasn't our victory. Our victory was the lives we'd rebuilt, the community we'd created, the truth we'd set free. After the trial, Claire invited us to her new home, a small, cozy house with a garden she was learning to tend. We sat on her patio, sipping wine under a starlit sky, the air warm with summer's promise. Emily shared her plans to expand Unveiled's counseling services. Lisa talked about a job offer she'd accepted, and I revealed my latest project, a series of illustrations inspired by our stories, each one a testament to resilience. Claire raised her glass, her eyes shining. "To us," she said, "to the women we were, and the women we've become." The toast was a turning point, a moment where we let go of the pain that had defined us for so long. I thought of the woman I'd been 2 years ago, trusting and naive, unaware of the storm waiting to break. That woman was still part of me, but she was stronger now, tempered by truth and community. Claire, Emily, and Lisa were my family, not by blood but by choice, bound by a shared journey through betrayal to triumph. Unveiled continued to grow, its impact rippling outward. We received letters from women who'd left toxic relationships, who'd found strength in our story. One letter from a teenager named Mia stayed with me. "You showed me I don't have to be silent," she wrote. "You showed me I'm enough." I framed it, hanging it in my studio beside my sketches, a reminder of why we fought. David's name faded from our conversations, replaced by plans for the future. Claire started dating again, cautiously but with hope. Emily found love with a kind man who attended our workshops, drawn to her strength. Lisa enrolled in night classes, chasing a dream she'd set aside. And I was still healing, but I was painting again, my art a bridge between the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. The cruelest truth David taught us was that trust can be weaponized, that love can be a lie. But the greater truth we discovered was our own strength, our ability to rise from the ashes of betrayal and build something beautiful. Unveiled wasn't just a support group. It was a movement, a testament to the power of women who refuse to be broken. As I stood in my studio, finishing a painting of 4 women standing together under a bright sky, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The canvas was vibrant, alive with color and hope, a reflection of the life we'd created from the wreckage. David had tried to destroy us, but he'd underestimated our resilience, our unity, our refusal to stay silent. We weren't just survivors. We were warriors, and our story was far from over.